So
Okay, I just pushed go live, so I think we should be in a couple of minutes or a couple seconds.
It's there.
oh, is it
It's
there?
very
Yeah.
Let's check it out. Oh, there we are. All right, it's sharing time. Let's
I'm
see.
trying to click on it from my iPad. What in the world? Ah.
I just pushed go live, so I think we should be in a couple of minutes. Turn down your volume on your phone.
It's there.
Oh, is it there?
Yeah.
Oh, is it my volume? Oh, there we are.
It could be
All
my.
right, it's sharing time. Let's see.
I'm trying to click on it from my iPad. What in the world?
There we go. I think my computer was doing, making the sound.
Okay. All right. Okay, I just posted on my page.
Me too. I'm gonna turn mine into a watch party if I can.
Yeah, that's what I'm doing.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah, I just did the same thing. So
There you go.
Oh yeah, I should just make it a watch party, right?
Yes. Uh-huh.
There we go. Start watch party.
Okay, people are joining.
Yay! Awesome. So good to see people hopping up here. Hey, Sharita. Yes. All right. We only got a few minutes. Let's see. Awesome. And need to share this to a couple of groups. Right? Sharing to a couple of groups here.
We are getting ready, y'all, for all those folks who are joining in. Thank you for joining. I see Sam and Roy have joined on my side, Kathy. So we're going to get started with the Black Indians NC panel in just a couple of minutes.
Yes, we are. Thank you for joining us tonight, everyone. Yay. Awesome. Let's see. I feel like I should have had some music playing. Yeah, so
I get the text notification.
oh, so we're going to get started, everyone. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us tonight for the first of our series for the Black Indians NC Conversation Circle. Yay!
Yay!
I have tonight some amazing panelists that I'm so excited to share with you. And the beauty of it is each of them I've connected with in so many different ways, whether it's serving on a panel together, or we have some different collaborations coming up, or we've been friends for years. So I'm so excited to present all these people that are going to be sharing their experiences and expertise of things that we're going to talk about tonight. So again, let's get started. So I'm going to start first with Amina Ghaffar. Her is a Lumbian Black activist from Pembroke, North Carolina. She studied biology at East Carolina University and physiology and biophysics with a concentration in integrative medicine at Georgetown University. Her research focuses on usually using culturally sensitive and indigenous modified modalities to treat historical trauma. She blends wisdom traditions with Western evidence-based research. Amina is an Indigenous advocate and focuses most of her advocacy on missing and murdered Indigenous people and culturally sensitive methods to treat historical trauma in marginalized populations. She is vocal about all sources of injustice and uses her website, goodmedicinewoman.com, to create content that addresses social justice, finding common humanity between marginalized populations and misconceptions about Indigenous medicine. So yes, so excited to have her here. Yes.
I'm so excited to be here.
Yes, thank you so much. Oh my gosh, guys, you have to check out her blog. It's amazing. Again, Good Medicine Woman. Next, we have Stephen D. Gale is the founder and executive director of the Afro-Amerindian Research and Cultural Center, a nonprofit 501c3 C3 organization based in the metro Atlanta area. Stephen earned his bachelor's in history education from the University of North Carolina at Pembroke and a master's in media and communications from Norfolk State University. He is currently pursuing his PhD in international conflict management. Stephen's research centers on the historical and contemporary interactions of African and Native American populations in the U.S. from an international conflict management perspective. In addition to his academic career, Stephen is also an independent filmmaker, directing the documentaries Seven City Legacy and By Any Other Name, an exploration of Afro-Amerindian heritage. He is currently developing a film on the life of noted Philadelphia activist Maddie L. Humphrey. So everyone meet Stephen. Yes.
Hey, Stephen.
Hey, everybody. Thanks for inviting me. Happy to be here.
Thank you so much for being here. And that other lovely voice you just heard was Mallory B, plus model, owner of the Platform Experience. Mallory B began her journey officially in the plus size fashion community in 2014 as a wardrobe stylist. She continued her platform and grown in the industry further, developing her pageantry experience, styling clients, and evolving into a working plus size model now of over 5 years. Since she has cultivated the Platform Experience, her fashion house, and is responsible for developing Crusade of Curves, which is coming up. It's the premier and exclusive fashion week for curvies, the Creative Exchange, and the Model Mentor series. She too is the founder of the Phoenix Tribune, North Carolina's Native American publication, and continues her work in philanthropic efforts in mental health, consulting, and brand coaching. Everyone meet Mallory.
Hey, everybody. Thanks for the invite.
Yes, thank you for being here. So Frederick Murphy, since Frederick Murphy was young, he was always enjoyed talking to his elders and hearing stories of family history. In 2016, he founded History Before Us, a project centered on capturing, preserving, and advocating influential history. His first film, award-winning The American South as We Know It, explores the lives of survivors of Jim Crow, the courageous individuals who didn't make the headlines. Definitely check it out. I did on Juneteenth. It was great. His second documentary, The Other Side of the Coin, Race, Generations, and Reconciliation. The film is a collection of experiences and thoughts addressing the complexities of race in America. The participants featured in his film represent a span of different generations, which presents its own unique challenges. These challenges tend to reignite historical transgressions into the fold of present-day ideologies, begging the question, how do we reconcile for the sake of future generations and humanity? Frederick is a licensed professional counselor by trade, utilizes tactful questioning, empathy, and reflection to obtain relevant information needed to produce a true narrative of African-American history. He also has his master's degree in transformative leadership. So say hello, everyone. Thank you so much for being here.
Fun.
Thank you. Thank you so much. So Okra Adafo, a North Carolina native of Native American and African ancestry. He is an educator, currently teaches in Durham Public Schools, and received his bachelor's and master's degrees from North Carolina Central University. Go Eagles! And his certificate in secondary education from East Carolina University. Go Pirates! Among his passions are history, sociology, and cultural anthropology. So say hello, everyone. Yay!
How you doing? How's everyone?
Yes. I want to make sure I got everyone. And so I'm going down the list, guys. Going through the list here. And here we go. And then we have Allison Matthews, who is doing our tech for us tonight. Dr. Allison Matthews is a two-time TEDx speaker, researcher, entrepreneur, and community organizer. She is the co-founder of HIV Cure Research Day, To Beat HIV, and Digital Links, and an amazing person altogether. So welcome, Allison.
you. Thank you for having me.
Yes, and thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate all your tech savviness for tonight. And I really, and then I see you with your short bio, ma'am, which I know is much more extensive.
I didn't know everybody was going to be sending a dissertation. There you go.
We're gonna have some fun tonight, guys, because oh my gosh, I just love the energy. Just love the energy. And again, thank you so much. I know you didn't have to send a dissertation in to me, but that's okay. So, and then of course, last but definitely not least is Sutton King, everyone. And please forgive me because I just had a tech issue where I'm trying to find Sutton's bio. So I might have to let Sutton speak for us for tonight. Sutton, do you mind giving a brief synopsis of the great things you are doing?
Sure. So like Kimberly said, my name is Sutton King. That's my English name. My Indian name is Naktau Pianuki, which means comes first woman in Menominee. I'm from the Menominee and Oneida tribes of Wisconsin. I lived in New York City for the last 10 years. I recently graduated from NYU School of Global Public Health with a degree in public health, specifically focused on global health. I'm also the founder and executive director of the Urban Indigenous Collective, which is a 501c3 nonprofit focused on the health and wellness of urban natives living in the tri-state area. So I'm out of the Bronx, BX, love this borough. But I also do a lot of research and consultation as well, whether that's with the University of New Mexico, Florida State University, or the United Nations. So really excited to be here, and thank you for having me.
Thank you so much. Again, such an esteemed panel, and I'm so excited. And for those of you that may be watching that just might not know who I am, I am Kimberly Knight, and I am the founder of Black Indians NC, and it is also a Black Indians NC powwow for 2021. So we are very excited. I'm the chair for that powwow, and I'm very excited for and our Facebook group, the Black Indians NC, which you should follow if you're not already doing so, is about bringing together people of both African American and Native American ancestry or Indigenous ancestry. So we're being a collective of connecting with people, and it doesn't matter if you're not sure where your Indigenous heritage may be or your African American heritage may be. It's open for everyone, and we welcome everyone. We want to meet people and talk to people. So please, thank you for joining us tonight. So we're going to get started with the panel. So our first question, everyone, is what does it mean to you to be African American and Indigenous? What has that experience been like for you connecting with both sides of your heritage, if at all? And this is an open forum, so please feel free to chime in when you're ready. Don't rush.
We'll take a debate first.
Do I need to go first? I'm going last. Come on, panel.
I'll jump in.
Thank you.
Yeah. So, you know, I'm 40 years old, and outside of a memoir that my third great grandmother, Isabella Jones, left, and DNA evidence via her granddaughter, that was the only aspect of the Native blood and connection that I had. You know, that memoir was very important because she described her looking, well, people thinking that she was white when of course she was Native, as well as her being enslaved. So I had that context, but I grew up in Tennessee as living as a Black man, right? I'm a firm believer in not claiming something until you actually have full evidence on what that is, right? Because I think so many individuals, there's this romanticizing with saying that I have Native blood, right? For whatever reason, I don't know, but that's just something that's there. And that's just not with African Americans, but that's also with whites as well. So that's there, right? So it wasn't until recent that Kimberly, when I was telling you that I joined this DNA group, and it connected me with the Nansmod Indian Nation, as well as the Halawasaponi, which makes sense because that's where my family, that's where they were in. They were in Warren County, North Carolina. So I was able to make the connection. So for me, trying to mesh the two and now do even more research on that specific nation, as well as, of course, the evolving and continuous research from an African American standpoint to kind of deconstruct everything that was taught K through 12, to seek what the real truth is something that is very, I'm prideful for it, because it's a very unique situation to be in, to stake claim to both, right? Even though I've grown up most of my life as only considering myself as an African American male. So for me, that's it. It's very unique at this point. At this age, it's very unique for me.
Thank you so much for sharing that. Anyone else want to share on this topic we're talking about? Allison, yeah, what you got?
Yeah, I think my experience has been similar to Frederick's. I actually have always known that my great grandmother was Choctaw. And I mean, if you look at pictures, so this is on my dad's side of the family. If you look at pictures, she looks pretty much white. And then he's like this tall, dark-skinned man. But even though we knew that she was Choctaw, it was kind of like she had to give up her cultural kind of connection to her family because she married a Black man. And so for us, it was like we couldn't claim it. It was like we knew it, but we just had to just say we were Black or that we were Creole. And then being in Louisiana, I think a lot of times the Creole culture kind of dwarfs any conversation about American Indian culture, but even though they're very intertwined, and so much of the parallel between my upbringing as a Creole woman, like having that mixture of French and us speaking this Creole language, is very, I connected with Kimberly on that, and connected with this idea, and start to accept the fact that like American Indian is also, and Choctaw culture and history is also part of my history and a part of being Creole.
Thank you for sharing that. Yes, I think that's a great point that you brought up, just people being in different areas and spaces in the US, and there's how those relations were affected. Because when we look at different things, perspectives of how African Americans or Africans intermarried or married people of Indigenous descent, it's very different when you look at like the southern states like Louisiana and Alabama and Florida. It's very interesting. So thank you for sharing that. Anyone else want to share?
I can share.
No, go ahead.
Oh,
okay.
No, please.
Well, I just feel like claiming my identity as Afro-Indigenous is just like the ultimate symbol of resilience. Like my existence is resilience. That's how I feel. And I grew up very much so like deeply connected to my Indigenous culture. And I think that's, my just background on me. So my grandfathers were the last chiefs of the Menominee tribe. So if you're familiar with Oshkosh, Wisconsin, that's named after my great-great-great-grandfather. And I always grew up knowing that and just being so proud of what he did to, barter with the United States government and make sure that we could stay in our ancestral lands. We're one of the very few tribes that are actually still living, where our creation story started. And that, to me, I just have so much pride in that. And I grew up very proud. I remember, going to show and tells and being in predominantly white schools, but always, coming to the show and tell with my jingle dress dance on, and, coming with pictures of my grandfather or my grandmother and being so proud. And I think that's because my mom wanted me to be that proud, because, if you look at, just how colonialism has impacted our generations. My great-grandfather went to Haskell, and it was more mission driven, and, came out of that being very Catholic, where, his father was the chief of our tribe. And so my grandmother, her household was very Catholic and not very traditional in a sense to just indigeneity and, our traditional customs. So I think my mom really wanted to reinforce and maybe, make sure that I didn't forget who I was. I'm also Black, and on my father's side, and he comes from a historic town called Africatown in Mobile, Alabama. Unfortunately, I didn't meet my father till I was 24. I'm 27 now. And so that's when I first started to, really dig deep into what that means, and what the Black identity side of me represents. And so, I just feel like my existence is a political statement, and I'm just really proud to be both Black and Native. So.
Thank you for sharing, Sutton. Thank you so much. And to know that piece of historical history about your family is amazing. Mallory, you're next. What you got for me?
So joking. Hey, everybody. Much like my brother Frederick, I am from Eastern North Carolina, born and raised in Rocky Mount, North Carolina, just 30 minutes south of the Halawasaponi Nation, for which I derive. I grew up knowing exactly who I was. So my experience is a little different from his. I was enrolled as a tribal member at birth. I had very close connections and spent the weekends in Hollister with my family. And both my parents are from Halifax County. So you have Hollister, North Carolina, and then just attached to the east of it is Enfield, North Carolina, for which my mother is from. And much of her family has traveled and moved to different areas and spanning the East Coast. And then my dad's parents that were still alive, unlike my mom's parents, were right in Hollister. So on the weekends or when I was able to, or there was family functions, I was always spending time there. My mom is also, she's Black and Cherokee. We don't know much about her Cherokee ancestry, and that's something that I have to get up on. But my father is a Halawasaponi enrollment member. So throughout the course of my life, I took tribal classes to understand and know more. I too am a jingle dress dancer, so I smiled so much when she said that. I danced from the age of 3 to about 16, and then all of that, being a teenager, crept in and cheerleading and stuff came up, but no less. I've always had the connection. I was first runner-up for Miss Indian North Carolina twice, and I don't date me on it. Like, I don't even want to think about the dates, but those were awesome experiences for me to collaborate the fashion in my heart and the Indigenous in my blood in one space. So that was awesome. I also partnered with Marty Richardson and was a part of his team when we were granted funding for research as to what was going on in the tribe amidst our state recognition process in between 58 and 65. So we went out into the communities and did interviews with tribal elders and people that were willing to talk with us about what exactly life looked like for the Halawasaponi people during that time. So of course, subjects came up because our tribe is one of the few that has had its own tribal school. And then it disbanded and now has reunited and been graduating students for years now within our community in Hollister. So for me, being Afro-Indigenous just makes things a little more unique and complicated at the same time, because when you do come from multiple spaces, and this came up on a prior live with Kim and Allison, you feel sometimes, and I don't think family does it intentionally, and some unfortunately do, pigeon you to feel a certain way or attachment to one more than another sometimes. Mm-hmm. And I actually was having this dialogue with another biracial plus size model, and she's experienced much of the same, and she is not of the same mixture I am. However, she could identify those very same struggles, and in some cases over the span of her life feeling like not enough here, or I look more like this, or these traits don't identify with this side. So for me, it took, and is still working through me in my lifespan, and I'm over 30, but to just sincerely appreciate that I am from these two communities of incredibly amazing people that have contributed to the building of this nation. And that's what I have to grasp hold of and speak up for and talk to and speak with people, because I think sometimes, unfortunately, there are certain biases and things that resonate with people in our communities, and maybe we'll talk about this later in the live, but it's things that we as educated and urban Indians in some cases are more privy to and understand more clearly, and can take this information back to our respective communities and really speak to it from a space of intelligence and love, of course. So I think that with the question that you posed, I think I'm finished answering that, but we'll weigh in for future questions.
Okay. Thank you so much, Mallory. And
yes.
Thank you so much for sharing your perspective, because a lot of people know the perspective of what it's like to be connected that directly to a tribal community. So that's a good thing to talk about, that and what it's like to be Afro-Indigenous and still being connected. So thank you.
Kimberly, I have a funny story. So y'all in the jingle dresses and jingle dancing. So when at my church in Dallas, I was the light-skinned Black kid, or one of them. And so my church is like mixture of Black and Mexican American and Mexican immigrants. And so a lot of the Mexican immigrants are indigenous, and they would have these jingle dances, and they pulled me into the group. They're like, "Oh, here, you fit in. Come on." And they put me in the jingle dress, and I was like, "I don't know what I'm doing."
A whole intertribal situation.
Yeah. So I was like, you know what? I'm just gonna embrace it. And I danced with them. I didn't understand anything they were saying, but I just think it's ironic that like I actually do have indigenous blood, but didn't know what was happening, and then it was like a Mexican kind of anyway.
Foreshadowing.
Yeah.
I think jingle dancing is where it's the beginner dancer routine, because a lot of people have been in a jingle dancer and then advance on to like fancy and the traditional. Well, traditional is when you kind of want to take it slow a little bit, you know, you're ready to slow it down a little bit, not be so cardio based. The way to say it. If you are a jingle dancer out there, kudos to you. I know many great ones that are adult jingle dancers. I was a child, but I was not an adult jingle dancer. It just that level of cardio that you do.
It's a lot.
It's a lot.
Those calf muscles be working.
Absolutely beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. Anyone else have any comments about this question before we move on to question 2?
Yeah, I'll go really quick. And I was just going to say to Allison's comment, I don't know if you guys heard me, but we're all related. Indigenous Mexicans, we're all relatives. So it makes sense that they would be welcoming to other Indigenous relatives from other parts of Turtle Island. But for me, I've resonated with a lot of things that you guys have said as well in terms of growing up with my Native identity. My mom's always made me aware of my Native identity. I grew up in Pembroke, North Carolina. I went to school with a lot of Native people. And honestly, it wasn't until I started my expression to the world was through sports. So as I started getting more involved in track and field, I started to realize I'd always kind of resonated with my Black and my Native identity until I got onto the track. And one of the first races I ever did, I remember a parent was yelling out, "Don't let that white girl beat you." And I won the race, but I looked at my mom and I was like, "Mom, I'm not white." So that was kind of my first instance of being kind of confused about my identity. And really, and through my life, really figuring out what my identity means to me. And so, you know, growing up, knowing how to just being in that environment and understanding who I am as a person, and I didn't think I was going to get emotional talking about that, but just telling that story, you know, it just brings back so many memories.
Right.
And it's something I haven't really expressed and shared with other people before in this type of format. So just excuse me for pausing for a second.
No.
But,
Oh,
and I think
sharing.
it's important to understand like what the role of identity development does for the mental health of our kids. And it's important to instill those lessons, even if you don't think you look like the other side, if you don't look Black, if you don't look Native, it's important to learn lessons from both sides and really be proud of that. And so like I'm blessed to have the parents that I've had and the family that I've had that's never made me feel othered in those situations. So that's my experience.
Thank you so much for sharing that.
Thank you.
Oh, yes, thank you so much. It's not easy to be someone of dual heritages or cultures because many times people do make you feel like you have to choose a side. So, are there anyone else want to make any comments before I make mine?
Yeah.
Oh.
Sorry. But yeah, just real quick. You know, I grew up, you know, more so kind of like along lines with Frederick, because, you know, my family, we were always Black, you know, like, yeah, like if you saw us all together, you're seeing every shade that you could possibly imagine. But it was like, you know, we were just a Black family, you know, and then growing up, you know, my mom put, you know, Satchel Paige books in front of me, you know, like talk about like, you know, Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, that kind of stuff. And so like, you know, I always just had that identity, never looked at anything else really. And then, you know, but every so often, like somebody would say, oh yeah, you know, we got Indians in the family, that kind of thing. And they would just move on. And nobody really put it on made it important, you know, like they made it important enough for you to know, but nobody ever made it like a thing that is like part of your identity, you know? And so there was something I was always curious about, and I didn't really fully understand because I was like, well, nobody here looks like, you know, what's on TV, but, you know, you had like my dad's side of the family, they just like, oh yeah, you know, that's something. My mom's side of the family, oh yeah, you know, they said like my parents were this. And then you see pictures of certain people and I was like, well, you know, why does my great grandmother look Samoan? You know, it's like, explain some of these things to me, you know? And so it really wasn't until I got older and then some of the elders in our family started passing away that I started even looking at like who we are, you know, because some of the people who were always like these mainstays in our family that had all the knowledge, it was kind of like, well, as long as they know this stuff, we're fine. You know, don't worry about learning anything else about who you are or where your people come from, Black or other, you know, as long as these people are around. And then slowly as people started leaving us, you know, I started feeling like, well, who's preserving any of this? Who's looking into any of this? Who's going to answer any of these questions for the younger generations and stuff? And so, you know, as I started looking up things, like all of a sudden I became like the default historian for our family. And now it's like, I know all these random facts and that nobody wants to hear. And so like, but yeah, like on my father's side, you know, they just kind of casually mentioned like, oh yeah, you know, we're from Virginia, you know, and we have like this Native background and on both sides. And so like, I was talking to like one of our elders who passed away, my grandfather's sister, and she was 98, I believe, at the time. Wow. And she was like, you know, and like her father was born 1877, so it's like a lot of generation gaps and stuff. And so she was like, oh yeah, you know, my grandmother. And so it was like I was looking at this genealogy, and then, you know, and I had all the names like in my head, but they were just names for me, but they were actually people she knew. Wow. And so I was like, oh yeah, you know, so-and-so, like, what about that? And in the middle of something, like everybody's talking over each other, she was like, oh yeah, my grandmother, you know, she was Indian, and nobody's, you know, and that's what it was. You know, we called her, around us, we called her this name, and I don't even remember the name, unfortunately. I wish I had written it down or recorded her talking about it or something, but they called her a different name than all the records that we had of her. Like all her names were Catherine, and everything that we have that I could find. And amongst the family, they called her something that didn't sound English. And on that same side on my father's side, my grandmother, her family also claimed Native ancestry. They were free people going all the way back as far as we could find. And we have marriage records of people being married on reservations that don't exist on maps. And then they go by different names on these records in the family Bible, but then in the formal records, they're Williams, they're Jones and these other things. And so it's like, well, what's going on, But it's part of that knowledge. And on my mother's side, my grandfather, that was one of the By Any Other Name film was just about tracing his family and their stories. And it's still kind of inconclusive. Like we have some connections on his father's side with Choctaw, possibly, because we have people who married in who were on the enrollments applications. But their enrollments were actually, or their applications for tribal enrollment were denied because they were connected to slavery. And so we have a lot of just transient people and, all over the place, like my grandfather used to say, my family is like, we're so spread out. He used a different term. I'm not going to say it here, but he used to say like, our family is, we get everywhere. And like, we're all over the place. And so like, it was one of those kinds of things where like, I always know myself to be, this is how I identify as African-American. I feel like that's the truest label for myself, but I also feel like if this was something that was being passed down through all these different lines, these stories and these identities, it's worth knowing and it's worth preserving because, if there was any validity to any of it, you're talking about people that go back tens of thousands of years on this land. And, and that's a story that you have the power to either end or continue. And so preserving it continues that. And I think, who am I to say that that's not worth knowing, or why do I feel I'm so important that it should all stop with me? So, so the most I can do is my due diligence to continue to research and find some of the answers to those questions and kind of, lock things down a little bit more officially as much as possible. But, that's kind of where I'm coming from in terms of my identity and all that. So.
Oh, I'm so glad you shared that because I'm sure there are many people watching on a similar journey doing the family genealogy. I know I'm one of those people, and just finding your space there, just learning about all these different things and reasons why things were happening in your family and you're not sure of. Any more comments? Any more? I know we had Okra that was going to go, and then we'll go to you, Frederick.
Yeah. All righty. I am super proud to share a dual identity. This beautiful Afro-Indigenous woman.
Oh, beautiful.
This is my grandmother, Ophelia.
Nice.
It is courtesy of her genetics that I am part Cherokee and part Tikar. Cherokee being Native American, Tikar are of West Africa, Cameroon. So for me, the dual heritage, you guys have said a great deal that I was thinking, so I won't be too long. But it's a source of great pride, and I always say that my ancestors talk to me and talk through me. And I think we all share that in common from sitting back and listening to you guys. So it's a pleasure to be a part of the panel. Unfortunately, growing up, I didn't have an opportunity to participate in the Native American portion as much as I would like because there were certain sociological divides between Native American community and the Black community, which I hope that we'll actually get a chance to delve into a little more this evening. And if not in tonight's talk, then perhaps in future talks.
Yes. Thank you so much for sharing. And thank you for sharing that photo. I love photos. I want to see some follows Vintage Black Glamour Instagram pages. So I love beautiful photos of our people. It's just absolutely beautiful. So next, Frederick, you have a comment.
Yeah, just to kind of piggyback off of what Stephen was saying as far as doing the research. It's kind of like, so when I was doing some family research on my Indigenous grandmother, Isabella Jones, who was first cousins with Collins, which both bear tight names with regard to the Nansemond tribe as well as the Haudenosaunee. they were listed in 1870 census as mulatto all the way up until, 1890 census was a wrap. So up until, so in 1870 and 1880, they were all listed as mulatto, right? And then when it got to the 1900 census, they were going by black, right? The census taker came and labeled them black. And so much of that took away the autonomy of individuals having the ability to practice and continue some of the cultural norms in which they may have grown up in, for so long. And it's kind of like this government, with the one drop rule and all these other different things, 3/5 compromise, et cetera, they can influence the output that you put into future generations by telling you what you are, right? So I can only imagine that individuals like my grandmother, as well as other individuals, maybe didn't completely drop some of their cultural norms, but if you're constantly identified by other people and they're telling you this is what you are at this point, then how much does that affect you doing the things such as storytelling, you continuously practicing in the things that you would normally do? If it wasn't for her memoir telling us about how she would use sassafras, sage, and all these other different things from the earth to create these different concoctions, then I wouldn't have any idea that she even knew how to function in her cultural norm from a native standpoint, right? So I think that so much of with regards to race, what's influenced with regards to what it is that we share with other individuals back then, I think a lot of it was driven by what that white guy came around to each one of those houses, looked at you and designated who you were based off the color of your skin versus everything else. So kind of like what Stephen was saying, was kind of going through some of those records. When I was doing the same thing, it got confusing. And you're like, damn, do I got the same family? Is this the same family? All the babies and everybody's names the exact same. It's just they 10 years older now. So it all matches up, but they're listed as being this versus that, right? So I just wanted to piggyback off of what you were saying, Steve, and how frustrating that can be sometimes.
Yeah, and I'm so glad you brought that up, because when you do research in genealogy, for anyone out there that may be researching your family, I will tell you, you will see your relatives change ethnic backgrounds 3 to 4 times sometimes, depending upon where your family lives. And the keys that I found from talking to genealogists who research particularly indigenous people in southeastern North Carolina, is they say focus on the land. Where did they live? Where did they travel? Where did they migrate from? What river were they connected to? What nature were they connected to in communities? And what, because even though the last names and the surnames will give you some indication, sometimes it may not, because again, with the census takers, people's names were misspelled, people's identities were changed different ways. So that's why it's very important to do Census 2020, because you can identify yourself. So that's why it's so important when people are doing the record keeping is important. So thank y'all for sharing that. We're going to jump in. Any more comments on that before I move on to question 2? All right. Go ahead,
so not to prolong this, but I just want to react to what Frederick said and what you just said. So I'm a sociologist, and my background actually is looking at race and race relations and racial identity. Right. And I've always thought it was interesting, that idea of race changing, and so even though, like I said, I didn't identify with American Indian culture per se, the Creole culture, I think is interesting, because maybe in the last 2 years or so, I started, doing just like digging even deeper into Creole history and Creole culture. And it is such a hybrid of African and American Indian communities, right? And then the French. And so even though I didn't identify with it, once I started reading the books, I was like, wait, this was our family practices, like what you were saying, Frederick, like, the way that we cooked our food, the direction we stirred the food, if we put things behind the door, and if we sprayed holy water. So, it's just such a hybrid and having the sage and having, like such a hybrid of all of these cultures, that when I, had started having conversations with other people, and with family members, you realize, wait, we did pass down our culture. We did pass down that history. We just didn't know that's what it was.
Yeah.
So, and I think that also goes into what you were saying, like there is a power dynamic at play in stripping us of our history and being able to name it, taking that language away from us to be able to identify with, and having the records to be able to identify with who we are and connected to our land. I mean, that to me is such a foreign concept. To be African American, we are not connected to the land. We were stripped from our land. But then to also identify with being American Indian, we are connected to the land. My family's been there since the late 1700s. So, in some ways, that's really just a powerful statement, and it really struck me. So I felt like I needed to say something.
Thank you for sharing that, because I think it's important to talk about how many different Afro-Indigenous experiences there are when it comes to, we're a big collective, a big melting pot, just as diverse as any other group. And for me, growing up, I want to thank my dad. Shout out to Dad, you're watching. I wanted to thank my dad for always making sure that I knew his Indigenous background, Eastern Band Cherokee. He was really focused on making sure I went to the reservation, that I knew about the cultural piece, the language, learning the language, giving me books as a child about the language. Very big about me learning how to speak it. Really about his jewelry that he would wear, and just different, taking me to powwows since I was a small child all the way up to adulthood and doing it on my own. Just really about knowing who you really are. I'm like kind of similar to Mallory, where my father's side was more identified with my dad's mother. She was from the Ivory Coast, so West African. So it was a lot of cultural practices of African and Indigenous, but like similar to Mallory, in a sense, your father's identity is a little bit more defined, but your mother's, you're still kind of researching a little bit deeper. So I'm now researching currently my mother's side of the family, and it's taking me right on to Halifax and Warren County, with a lot of surnames that we hear all very commonly: the Mills, the Lynches, the Evans. Our whole lineage is just like literally my fourth great grandmother back is all of those names. So it just leads to learning the process of it. And like you were saying about the seeing mulatto to colored to Black to Negro, to seeing all these different identities switched up, even some were labeled white in certain parts that I've seen. So it's just, now I think it's so good that people are now going back and trying to really research and look into things. So yeah, thank you guys for y'all comments from everything. And as for how do you feel about this global pandemic, though? We have COVID-19, and it's definitely directly affecting both communities directly. I know some of you can speak from a research perspective, some can speak from a community perspective or personal perspective, but feel free to give a comment about how do you feel it has affected the African American and Indigenous communities that you are connected to. How do y'all feel about that for COVID-19? Anybody? Don't go.
I'll go. Okay. So I've been thinking about this a lot, and I actually got tested for COVID last week because I've been out protesting and I was having symptoms, and so I went and got tested 2 Fridays ago. It took me 10 days to get my results from the lab, so that was pretty stressful. And I think it's important, since we are having also a national uprising, to make sure that we're taking care of ourselves, to make sure that we're masking up, we're washing our hands. When we get home, we shower, and we, still are abiding by protocol. My test came back negative, and I think it has something to do with taking those extra precautions after being out. So I feel like I need to say that first. But I've been thinking in the past few weeks, so there's been talk about the vaccine, and I've seen a lot of controversy online about it, and I want to address the cognitive dissonance with that, because before the pandemic, generally everyone was on board with getting vaccines. I think we can say as a collective, everyone was on board with getting vaccines. And I understand the mistrust with the medical system, especially with the Black community and Native community, with forced sterilization for Native and Black women. The issue that with women Black women dying in childbirth at higher rates than the rest of the population. There's a Tuskegee experiment with people with research agencies infecting Black people with syphilis intentionally in the study. So many people died in that experiment. But so there's clearly mistrust has been documented. But at the same time, coming from a research perspective, as someone who's looked at different research literature and not seen Natives included in different studies, not seen enough Black participants included in studies, and how that affects the outcomes of experiments for drugs and how they work for people of color. So when I saw the article about people being upset about Black people not being a part of the experiment to get the vaccine, for me, it was kind of like, I think it's important we do have participants that are Black, that are Native, that are Latina, Latinx, or Hispanic involved in those studies, because we still need to understand that it's important to be able to generalize these results for the whole population and not just the white population. And obviously the pandemic is affecting communities of color at higher rates than the white community for socioeconomic factors and all different kinds of reasons. But, and I saw an article that said one of the things we could do to address the mistrust was have HBCUs run the trials. And I think that's a great solution, but I don't think that we can sit here and say that we won't take the vaccine or we don't want the vaccine when we've been pro-vaccinations for so long. And also, I've been thinking about this. So I'm just like making sure I'm like getting on my points here. But I don't agree with the outrage, and I do think it's important to make sure that we do have diverse studies in addressing the vaccine. And if there's a vaccine that comes out anytime before in the next couple of months, I wouldn't trust it, because it takes a certain amount of time to do a good RCT. So I think as long as all those factors are met, where we address the mistrust and we address the proper protocols that are in place to make sure that we're going through the proper protocols to get a good drug for the general population, I don't have a problem with it.
Awesome. Thank you for commenting, hon. I was hoping that you would, being with your background. So I'm so glad you commented. And it is tricky when it comes to doing clinical trials for people of color. So it is. Anyone else want to comment about COVID-19? Okay, I knew Allison was coming. Come on, Allison, then Sutton, then Stephen.
This is my area, so I'm like, yes.
Come on now, come on.
So just to give people background, I work in the Maya Angelou Center for Health Equity. I'm the associate director of this program called Integrating Special Populations, which literally is about recruiting and retaining racial ethnic minority groups into clinical trials. So that's what I do for a living. And right now I am a co-investigator on a large coronavirus study called the Coronavirus Community Research Partnership. And so that study is focusing on asking people to track their daily symptoms and exposure to coronavirus. And then a subset of people would get home test kits to test themselves for coronavirus, but they're testing for antibodies. And I think a lot of the things that you brought up, Amina, about the mistrust and lack of representation in clinical trials is so relevant for this study, but then just in general, it's just so relevant. And I understand. So I think we have to be very careful about the approach, because on one hand, it is absolutely required, necessary for us to have Black, American Indian, and Latinx representation in these studies. Because if we don't, we're the ones who are dying, right? Not everybody else may be getting the virus, but we're the ones who are dying from it. And so if we don't have people participating in the studies, then they're not going to develop prevention or treatment therapies. They're not, the vaccine, it could be based on genetic or environmental factors that are not tied to our lived experiences. So on that side, I'm like, yes, we need to have, and I'm gung-ho about it. But I think what also I think is important to mention is that, and it's interesting because these kind of pandemics are happening at the same time, right? Like this racism thing and this virus thing are happening simultaneously, and yet they've always happened simultaneously. Mm-hmm. People are just now recognizing that they're happening simultaneously. The research designs and the structure of research institutions and medical institutions they are designed just like every other system in this country and in this world to exclude and to make it difficult for and to forget about, right, racial ethnic minority groups. One thing that I've heard, interestingly, we have the American Indian Health Board, North Carolina American Indian Health Board that's housed in the Maya Angelou Center. And we have, we worked with this, I have one of my colleagues who's watching right now who leads a study called Native Pathways to Health, Dr. Megan Irby. And so, with those, some of the feedback that we've gotten is that people don't trust, you don't want to be used as guinea pigs and don't want to be exploited, and to, it's almost the exact opposite of what it was before. When clinical trials happened before, we had overrepresentation of racial ethnic minority groups who were exploited and who were abused, which is what you were talking about with those studies. And now it's to the other extreme where we're not in them at all, maybe because people are too concerned or kind of too concerned about appearing racist or doing the wrong thing or saying the wrong thing, and also not thinking about how to make the extra effort to like get out of the hospital and get out of the clinic to go talk to people and get people involved in trials. And a big thing that I've heard is that American Indian people in particular are very sensitive about anything regarding blood and drawing blood or giving DNA. And I think Black people are the same. So it's just a lot of concerns and considerations right now that that are kind of all happening at the same time. So that's, yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing that. Yes. Anyone else want to comment? Any other comments about COVID-19, how it's affecting? Yes, Sutton.
Yeah. Well, I think that Amina and Allison spoke so beautifully to it and just hit a lot of my points that I wanted to say. But actually today I was at the Harlem Hospital Center. It was a day of action for people of color, for health justice. So I got to go up there and, talk my stuff. But, the first thing I had to say was that we need to dismantle white supremacy in our healthcare systems. There's a reason people are feeling uncomfortable about, getting care from our healthcare systems. And again, what Allison spoke about and what Amina spoke about, I think we have to acknowledge that, our public health systems have really been advanced at the expense of people of color. When we talk about these experiments that were done inhumanely and without consent, when we didn't have control of what was happening to our own bodies, why people go, have this aversion that they can't understand when it comes to, our healthcare systems or doctors. I mean, historical trauma, like I always say, is woven into our DNA, And so I think that the healthcare system has to create a space that's anti-racist. I think that also, we need to demand that we're in control of our healthcare. We have to come together and we have to stand in solidarity to transform what our healthcare looks like. And we have to dismantle the racism, classism, and the sexism that's embedded into these systems that are supposed to support us. And I see this reoccurring theme of like, these systems are supposed to protect us, but, you know, historically they've harmed us, you know, and so how do we gain that trust again? How do we repair all the damage that's been done for so many years? So, you know, I'm really about, I think that we have the solutions to our public health crises, and we should be leading those initiatives. We should be, leading those programming. We should be implementing those programming, and I think that could be a first step in kind of repairing the trust that was broken between our communities and these systems. We decide what it looks like, and, we do the work.
Thank you so much. Anyone else want to comment? COVID-19. Yes, Stephen.
So, I mean, one of the things that I was always told was like, when the white man gets a cold, the black man gets a flu, it's like we're in a position, socioeconomic position where we're always more susceptible for disease, sickness of all kinds, mental health issues, things of that nature, just because of our station in this country. And so, it's like you're kind of already creating a space where we're more susceptible to being sick or more susceptible to having some sort of ailment. And then also, like, the entire systems are based off of using these individuals. And so it's like, when you're looking at pretty much any system in this country, it's predicated off of the idea of exploitation. And then when you have this exploitation established, that's used as the testing ground for the establishment for the others, for the predominant, more white society. And meanwhile, the minorities are always the ones that are looking at as being, the testing ground, the guinea pigs, the workhorses, to kind of establish where the pitfalls in that particular system might be. We're always the floor. We're never the ceiling. We're never in that position where we can establish, the parameters of any of the structures. We're just there to make sure that there's always a floor. And I think that's probably one of the central issues. And then on top of that, right now in particular, we have a lack of trust on the global stage. And so from a governance standpoint, you're seeing a failure across, all these different tiers of our government, to the point where, why would I trust my doctor? And even if my doctor messes up, who's holding them accountable if we can't even hold a president accountable, if we can't hold a governor accountable? There's all these areas of lack of trust, and to the point where I think, not to be overly pessimistic, but it seems kind of abysmal, because it's like, well, where do you reestablish that trust? Where's the starting point for that? And I think, and then that's not even discounting, like, that's not even looking at rather our history, of constantly being failed by our country in all these different ways, And so, I don't know, my outlook is kind of cynical on that. It'd be great, for us to even with what Sutton was saying in terms of us leading the way, but it's like, leading the way also means having a certain level of autonomy, a certain level of power, and power isn't given, and it's like, where do you work within that space to kind of create, institutions for yourself when you're lacking a certain level of power, because there is immediacy, in all of this too. So I don't know. I think that's just kind of an observation of mine, I suppose.
Thank you for that, because that almost literally segues into question number 3. But does anyone else have any comments about number 2, about COVID-19?
Can I jump in for a second?
Yeah, sure.
I think, because I understand the pessimistic view of things, but I have a lot of optimism too, because the rate of Black doctors, Native doctors that are going into medicine now are increasing exponentially. There's still a heavy disparity there, but I have faith in my peers, and I have faith in myself in helping rectify some of the wrongs of that system. And people like Allison, people like Sutton, and other people on this call are really challenging the system. And I think it's important to keep that hopeful outlook and look to younger generations. And, older generations have made the pathway easier for the future to really like walk through these doors that were closed before. And so I think it's important to keep that outlook, and to keep hope, and keep feeding the younger generation and giving them hope, and creating programs to help people from marginalized communities get into those rooms, help them pay for medical school, help them pay to become PhDs and do research. And I think we are our answer. We are the solution to our problem. And we don't need no saviors. We don't need nobody to tell us what to do. We don't need no white man to tell us that we're good enough, because we know that already. Like, we have that in our DNA. Like, I mean, we're sitting here like Black natives on a call right now. Like, we have so much resilience, and I think we got this. I mean, I'm excited for what's about to happen. All this stuff going on right now, I'm so excited. Like, but yeah, we can go to question number 3.
Ooh, you just motivated me because I'm tired every day, and I'm like, yes, we are the answer.
Yeah.
Yes, that's right. We
To chime in also with that, when you think about Black and Native communities, you know, you have healers in those communities. You literally have individuals that weren't of African and Native descent who were seeking those communities in order to heal those individuals' loved ones, their livestock, like all these different things. I mean, all these different ailments that were happening in enslavers' homes. Who would they go to in order to find a cure for what that looked like, right? So naturally and innately, we are healers, African Americans, people of African descent, Native Americans, Indigenous as well. You know what I'm saying? You know, and sometimes people like to interchange, you know, the names, of course. So I just want to be respectful. But yes, like she said, it's innate in all of us to do these things, as healers have always been in our communities, even still to this day, right? I think of my great-grandmother and my great-great-grandmother. I think of all these other individuals that were in various different communities. They'll brew up something real quick and you'd be like, well, where in the world, how in the heck, you know, how did that come about, right? Like, where did you get this stuff from? And it's because it's innate, it's in us to do these things, right? So, you know, Amina, like you had mentioned, I do think that, I think that we are the answer for what that looks like. We just need sometimes for government and other individuals to just get out the way, you know what I'm saying, to allow us to do these things. You know, I'm automatically thinking about what, being that most of my family was there in Warren County, I'm thinking about the landfill thing, March on Environmental Justice that they had there when they dumped toxicity into African American neighborhoods there. And then even in, I have a really close friend in Africatown, and they had a paper mill that was there. And so many people, unfortunately, in that community in Africatown got cancer on more than one occasion. And there's supposed to be a settlement that's going on now, which they're trying to get for those individuals. But this is something that's happened a long time ago. So I know an individual who unfortunately contracted, that got cancer due to those paper mills in that area. And the paper mills, they've been gone for such a long time, but those communities are still suffering, right? So yeah, sometimes people just need to get out the way, let our healers do their thing.
Just wanted to add, Frederick, my grandfather worked in those mills for 40 years before he passed of cancer.
Yeah.
I'd love to connect with you to learn more about.
Yeah, I can connect you with some people down there in the community. I know them really well.
Thank you.
Ah, see, this is why I love getting people together. So many connections and everything. And then I will say, COVID-19 has definitely been affecting many communities. When we come to Black and Indigenous, we're seeing the numbers of cases increasing in tribal communities. And one thing that I think is sometimes it can be lack of education, access, and resources, of course. But I think too, when we have a collective like ourselves, we have to give as much awareness to communities that may not understand or may not comprehend the information that's being given to them about why it is safe to wash your hands for this amount of time or more, why it is safe for you to carry that hand sanitizer, why it's more safe for you to wear that mask and social distance, even when you really want to hug people. I had to attend a family funeral this weekend, and many family members wanted to just, like normal, come in and start hugging immediately. But we had to remember we're in a pandemic, and we all just came, even though it's only a few of us, we all were coming from different communities and different places. And so we had to be conscious of that, because no one knows if someone was asymptomatic or not, but we still had to show some type of kindness and love to one another. So yeah. Absolutely. Any more comments on COVID, or we're moving on next to our next topic? All right, so we're moving on next, and many of the viewers that are still hanging in here with us, it's a lot of them tonight. Glad they're hanging in. We are going to talk about the Black Lives Matter movement. It's something that has been going on nationally, internationally. I'm not even going to label it national. Internationally has been going on, and people are very, very much expressing themselves in so many different ways to show support in the movement. This question is in regards to that movement particularly. How do you feel as someone of both cultural backgrounds as a person? How do you feel about this system of oppression and systematic racism that we're talking about? Because I mean, there have been comments that many of us have seen, I'm sure, online from both communities that could come off very derogatory and insensitive and disrespectful to the Black Lives Matter movement in overall. And this is a movement that can, as many of us know, can support many of the issues we have amongst people that are Indigenous and African Americans. So with that being said, I want to hear what you guys have to say about Black Lives Matter in reference to how this makes you feel. Who would like to go first? Mallory, you got something? Sutton, you going? Okay.
Yeah, I can, I found it to be just the perfect opportunity to talk about the anti-Blackness in tribal communities. I think that the colorism and how it affects our communities, it's an issue, and we've got to talk about it. Me being one of the first, people in my ancestry on the Native side to be mixed with Black, Natives love to joke. Humor has gotten us through a lot of hard times. But for me, in my experience, there was a lot of Black jokes that were really hurtful to me, and Natives would, I'm just kidding. That's a rite of passage to joke with you, but it was really harmful, and, now I have the language to communicate what was happening, and that was anti-Blackness. And, it's been hard to, communicate. I wouldn't say it's been hard, but it's been uncomfortable for a lot of my family members to realize that what they were participating in was anti-Blackness. And I just want them and any of them that may be tuning in to understand that it's okay to acknowledge that you were wrong, and then we can move on and fix that behavior. And so that the other, cousins in my family that are now mixed with Black, and they won't have to endure that type of behavior that made them feel less than for being Black and Native. I think that's important. And that also ties to just, I think, blood quantum. I think that's an issue that I always talk about. Just these racial classifications that are being used by colonial tools to put us in boxes and pit us against each other. They love to see us pit against each other. But I think it's a really good time to just talk about just anti-Blackness and tribal communities and how we can move away from, just the colorism that we see in our communities.
Awesome. Anyone else want to comment about Black Lives Matter movement and for your perspective? How do you feel about being Afro?
I just want to piggyback on what Sutton was speaking regarding anti-Blackness. It's something that's become a global culture. You actually find wherever you find colonized. One of the discussions that I got into the other day in our chat room on Facebook was regarding the dark phenotype. Let's be clear, wherever you go on Earth, right? The original people of that land were quote unquote Black. And the reason I say quote unquote is because the reality is that the dark phenotype is something that has always existed amongst Indigenous Americans, amongst every group, wherever you find people on the Earth, even in Europe. Let's just keep it 100. But because of indoctrination from the colonizer, people have been made to look upon the dark phenotype as taboo. And it is from this way of thinking that essentially, in most cultures, they've turned on their kinsmen, those who are of a darker hue. We've always had phenotypical variations, in every group, including amongst, Indigenous Americans. So whenever I hear the anti-Black or anti-dark phenotype discussions, I challenge it. I challenge it amongst, Indigenous Americans. I challenge it amongst continental Africans. I challenge it amongst Caucasians. I challenge it, wherever I hear it mentioned. Um, and the reality is that without the dark phenotype, no other phenotype exists. You can get, like in my family, we have every shade, every hair texture, every eye color. But you can't take two Caucasians and put them together and get the dark phenotype. It's just the reality. So it is what it is. I'll leave it there. I'm not going to take it as far as I want to. I'll leave it there for right now.
No, I think that's great. I'm glad you shared that. Allison, you got something for me?
I have a couple things. So one is, I think we have to be, we can't separate anti-Black racism from capitalism. The amount of vitriol that we see against Black people, and even this narrative that I think, part of the anti-Black racism, and is especially tied to the Black Lives Matter movement, is this idea that Black Lives Matter is violent, that it's inciting chaos in the communities, and that they are anti-police and establishment, and want to just overthrow. They're anarchists, and they don't have a real agenda, or they're just out there to dismantle things. And yet they're out, and this is a parallel to what you see from COINTELPRO, the counterintelligence, this movement against Black Panthers and other activists to fight for actual freedom, to fight for the actual ideals of this country. And then to tie that into both Black Panthers and Black Lives Matter. I've seen this analysis to trying to understand why Occupy Wall Street didn't necessarily work. They were anti-capitalist, kind of pushing for this more economic equity, but they ignored the racial component of capitalism. And so what I think we have to keep, they're tied together, right? And the anti-Blackness becomes a distraction, right, against and away from understanding how elite groups, the wealthiest 1% of the world, are controlling the world and keeping all of us low income, poor folks. I'm not low income per se, but I am low wealth, I would say. And, keeping all of us pitted against each other and distracted by racism, right? And that is something that has consistently been used as a tool throughout history. So when you see American Indian people who identify with being oppressed and do not trust the federal government, who are then out at a protest saying Trump, voting for Trump, and against the Black Lives Matter movement, then you have to really question, what is this really about? Is it about racism, or is it about the elite using racism as a tool to keep these people oppressed and distracted from actually combining together poor white, poor American Indian, poor Latinx, poor Black folks, to combine together and fight against the wealthy and fight against capitalism. So, we need to keep all of that together.
Yes, thank you. Anyone else want to comment?
Yeah, I spoke with
And then Amina.
I'm sorry.
You good?
And I'm actually bringing her up because I spoke with a good friend in Pembroke today, and he had discussed how disappointed, and he's Lumbee, and he talked about how disappointed that he was in the things that happened. And he shared with me, we are our saviors, a message to rising Lumbee leadership, which was an excellent blog post. Amina, I appreciate you for doing that. And you got a lot of people talking. You're opening up the minds to a lot of individuals to hopefully look at this thing from a comprehensive point of view versus something that's very narrow-minded. And what me and my friend was talking about, I won't say his name, he's an Oxidine, but we talked about how right now is our moment to leverage what it is that we need as Black and brown folks in order to create positive change in this country. And unfortunately, it always has to happen off the heels of a death of a person of color. And in this case, it's a string of African Americans, right? So we had the conversation on how many Native women are ending up missing, how much death is happening on reservations as well, and the lack of resources, et cetera, et cetera. So if there's any time to fight white supremacy, this ideology, we have to do it from a collective, just how we're all on this panel together. This is how it needs to be. We need to be locking arms, walking down these streets together, because the fact of the matter is when one of us win, we all win, right? Like we all win when one of us win. But if individuals can't understand and conceptualize that, specifically in communities that actually have Black and brown folks in it, such as Warren County, such as Pembroke, Lumberton, that area, Robeson County, then we're missing the mark on that. If we are saying that there's three sides of the track, white side, Black side, and Native side, when all of those sides are collectively living in these communities, if the Black and the brown side don't connect together and power up like Power Rangers, then we're missing the mark, because we have no business discriminating on each other based on the fact that from an oppressive standpoint, we're in a petri dish. We're literally in a petri dish and easy targets just based on things that have happened historically. So I'm hoping that individuals will rise up and understand the importance of that, and also understand that there are a lot of, there's some few bad apples out there, but when I'm in groups like this, I'm very optimistic about things, in the future. So again, Amina, I appreciate you for writing that. That was very thoughtful. So you all check that out on her blog. Good Medicine Woman.
Mm-hmm. Yes, please do. Amina, you got some comments for me?
Yes. Thank you for bringing that up. I wrote that it was 3:00 in the morning, and I was really upset. I was hurting, but I've been taught, even when you're at the lowest point, you always got to find some hope. There's always some light at the end of the tunnel. So you got to find that, and you got to hold on to that, and share that with others, because sometimes it's hard to really dig yourself out of that hole. And what's important to understand about Robeson County is that there's such a big hole there. The crime rate's super high, poverty's super high. We've always been pitted against each other. And it's important to understand that schools were not fully desegregated in Robeson County until 1988. So this stuff we're 20 years behind the rest of the country when it comes to civil rights, when it comes to equality, when it comes to equity. So it's important to understand all those things. And for viewers watching from Robco, we got this. This is an in-house issue. We know what to do. We know what the problems are at home. And we know, like, most of the stuff that was happening on the street, on the other side of the street, was coming from a source of miseducation. We need to still tackle that education system. There's a lot of reform that needs to happen. There's a lot of political corruption that needs to be addressed. We need to start having these hard conversations. And even despite having these hard conversations, when people start to make us feel afraid for speaking out about these things, we need to really rally behind each other and talk more. Because when they start talking, they start threatening and stuff, that's when we're really hitting somebody in a place they don't want to be hit. And we can't be afraid of that. So, and going back to the anti-Blackness part of the conversation, I've been all across Indian country. I've been places, and I like to think of myself as like a speaker agent, because I'm not Black passing, but people make a lot of anti-Black comments around me because they're comfortable. But as soon as they say something, I'm like, snipe, snipe, you know, like you thought, you thought. But, you know, I was in Navajo Nation and somebody was saying something about a Black Miss Navajo they had. She's Dene. She's just as much Dene as she is Black. So, and he would say something about that. And I was like, oh, by the way, my dad's Black. Conversation ended, whole mood changed. And, you know, you have to really, you can't be afraid to shame people for that, because they should be ashamed. That whole thing where you have to look a certain way. We were conditioned to believe that. We were conditioned to think that people of different skin tones didn't belong in the Native American community. We were conditioned to believe that we weren't all together. We weren't all one cohesive unit. So we have to decondition ourselves. We have to heal ourselves individually and as a community to make sure that we address all of the things that we were taught to divide us. And we have to come together, because we can't keep doing this. You know, it's been what, 5 centuries now? Like we've been fighting colonialism for 5 centuries. We've been fighting slavery for 4 centuries. Like, it's time for this stuff to stop. It's time for this stuff to stop. Amen. And we got to work together to do that. And we got to realize like the 5 centuries of oppression is going to equate to probably 5 centuries of more work. This is not something that we're going to solve overnight. This is going to take a long time. And so like these few weeks of protests, we've had some great results. We've got arrests. We got them questioning, changing the system, but we have to keep pushing, because we can't just settle for the little handouts that they're giving us right now. We have to really keep pushing to restructure the system to what we want it to be. And so I just want to remind people out there, like, you know, the protesting and stuff, fantastic, but let's make sure we go to the polls in November. Let's make sure we're doing our due diligence as American citizens, and we're understanding those things, and we're educating people that are 18 about how to vote, the process of voting. We have a lot of work to do. We're not done yet. So I just want to remind everybody of that.
Thank you so much. And again, everyone, do check out her blog. It's amazing. That blog post, we're going to have to post it in the link down below so we can have that. Anyone else have any comments about BLM? Yes, Mallory, come on, girl.
I would be remiss if I didn't say a word. Sis said so much just then that I'm not even gonna go into so. And Frederick, like, everybody has had phenomenal remarks with respect to this question, and it just makes me think about our history, and of course we relive it. Is here and is still here. So how are we healing and evolving at the same time? Because many of the constructs within our communities that are still there, and those ideologies and colorism and anti-Black behavior is still happening. So that, on top of the fact that we as Indian people are very hush-hush folk, like, we don't like to discuss issues, and it's really this generation that's really starting to like pound the pavement and be more vocal, like what she was talking about in her blog, and I'm gonna have to read it. It sounds excellent. But like, even the historical data research project that I did with Marty Richardson, there were some elders that would not open up at all and talk about the issues during civil rights movement. And this anti-Blackness is still stemming from within our communities, when we had to fight to decide, you know, to make people believe who we were when we said who we were was what we were, and not the other side. And unfortunately, you've got and this can go on for days. And so I hope, Kim, that you're going to take notes and, you know, give us an episode too, because this can like peel back like an onion. Like, it's so many layers to this thing. It's unreal. You have people in the same family, like first cousins, that some have paperwork, some don't. I have second cousins that are full Halawa, and they're just like, they always have claimed Black because they got tired of trying to identify as who they were, or because they were taught to just say that because it was easier. It was less of a conversation. So I urge anybody that's listening and watching us tonight, and thank you everybody that's still even joining, find your voice, partner with collectives like ourselves, and get educated. If you don't know or are having some of these moments within your family or within your mind or just within your society and community, find someone that you can disclose and discuss with. Find a safe place is what I like to say, because I can tell you right now, going to work and working I'm in a management role, however, upper management does not look like me. And so when a lot of the conversations are happening about Black Lives Matter, as well as my company taking some proactive approaches that aren't so traditional and make folk uncomfortable, the people that it's making uncomfortable is the people it don't affect. You know, so this even stems beyond our conversation tonight into a larger spectrum. And we have to, I'm with her, we have to be a collective and figure out how to do it together, because it involves allies across color lines. And are we for the same overall equity to people, to humanitarian, you know, to humanity? So I think that's where we really have to take a step back and find these partners and allies, have open forums. We cannot be afraid to go against tribal. Like, I'm not telling anybody, well, yes, I am. I'm telling you to be yourself, rebellious, and get the word out there. And I need to do even better myself and being more vocal in those platforms, because when people go to the tribal council meetings, it's like a listening session and somebody takes the notes and somebody may raise their hand to vote, but nobody really says anything to challenge or clarify or to provide additional supplemental information that's beyond these tribal communities that actually have an impact there, because it's in the sake of how we're taught in eldership. So we have to, you know, change the narrative a little bit. We still respect the elders. However, a lot of the changes that need to happen need to come from us. And if we're afraid to speak up to it and partner and discuss in a respectful way, of course, within the communities, then we're going to continue to snowball. And this is going to be an ongoing to affect our children and the next line of children and the next line.
Thank you so much, Mal, for giving that. I truly believe that. Anyone else have any final comments on BLM movement? Any final comments before we get ready to close out? Stephen, yes.
Yeah, just real quick. You know, I do think, especially with Allison bringing up COINTELPRO, like, I think that's something that we do have to look at too. And it's like, you know, I see certain segments of us looking at it as a model, you know, like it's something to kind of look at and look at the pitfalls that, you know, of past efforts, you know, how Amina said, marching isn't just going to get it done. So it's like, when you look back, they didn't just march, you know, when you look back in the 60s and 70s, you know, people didn't just march, but at the same time, counter efforts were made to kind of circumvent and co-opt the movement in different ways. And I think, in terms of COINTELPRO, like how Allison was discussing, that's something to look at in terms of how we're deviating or how we could be deviated from achieving real changes. I think, you know, just like everybody else was reflecting, this is an opportunity to really make big changes that we've never seen and that nobody's seen before us. And as long as we like kind of keep focused and don't allow ourselves in the process of allyship, in the process of looking for people to connect, that we don't also lose focus of making real change. And that would be probably like my only take on what I'm seeing is that, you know, just, you know, we must be careful and vigilant about not being co-opted and misinformed in the process and used in ways that we're not intending. You know, like nobody asked for Aunt Jemima to change. You know, I'm fine of them changing it, you know, but it's just like, you know, is that really affecting a boardroom? Is that affecting laws? You know, nobody asked for those things. It's great that you're looking at it now. It's great that you're starting to question the decision-making on that end, but let's keep focused on the true task at hand. And I think, you know, kind of analyzing how movements were stifled in the past is a good way of looking at that. and trying to make long lasting change. So that's all I got.
Yeah, thanks, Stephen. All right, guys. Well, we are getting ready to. Oh, go ahead.
Oh no, I was just going to say. Also, I'm pretty sure you guys are aware of. Nobody mentioned that COINTELPRO is now pretty much transformed into BIE, which is Black Identity Extremists. So definitely as well. As a matter of fact, I think we're probably on the list after having this. Be be aware of that reality. That COINTELPRO has not disappeared; it's just transformed. It's Black Identity Extremists.
I agree. It has. It's evolved. So we're going to do a 2-minute closeout. I want you to think, guys, of your final thoughts that you would like to express. I want to thank you especially for being on this panel tonight, and I'm going to give my final remarks at the end. So please take this time now to please give your final 2-minute remarks. Anyone can go at any time.
I'll jump in. From a mental health therapist standpoint, you try to figure out how to not fall into a sense of mundaneness because of everything that's going on. And I'm the type of person in which I like to literally be out in the community discussing historical trauma, having my camera into people's faces, gathering oral histories, gathering information, of course, doing family history research and all those type of things. But I can't go to certain places now because, of course, COVID. But platforms like this, it breaks up the monotony. And what you're doing here, and Steve, what you're doing there at Kennesaw State with your platform is you're really bridging the gap between two ethnic groups that should have really been connected, even more connected a long time ago, right? To one, learn more about each other. And not only that, but to look at things from a collectivism standpoint in regards to obtaining, changing laws, creating new laws and policies that helps the better good of two very, very marginalized groups of individuals who have been here forever, for a very long time, and has contributed so much to the economic fabric of the success in this country. If it wasn't for brown and black folks here in this country, people would have died off a long time ago. People didn't know how to cultivate their own land. I mean, you name it. It just would have been, no one would be here, right? The individuals who weren't as resilient, who didn't know what to do with the elements that were around them, right? So bridging this gap and creating a dialogue with regards to Black Indians is very, very much needed. And I just appreciate everybody for sharing their insight on today. And I hope to definitely stay in touch with y'all.
And tell us where we can follow you at.
Oh, yeah. So History Before Us is the website, historybefore.us.com. On social media is at History Before Us. And the new documentary, The Other Side of the Coin, Race, Generations, and Reconciliation, will be released. I'm thinking hopefully here within the next 2 months. And that documentary does consist of race. I go into African-American communities, white communities, and I did go into the Halawassaponi community and interview an individual, as well as the last year's powwow. So I've got to go back to Warren County, which I'm back there pretty frequently discussing various different things. So Mallory, I got to get your information so
absolutely
so we can chop it up. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
All right, cool.
Awesome. Next, let's go. Allison, next, close out 2 minutes for us and tell us where to follow you.
I will stick to the 2 minutes. Well, so I would like to conclude by saying that I am a strong believer in community collective voices and the power of collective voices, and the power and collective wisdom. I think that, with these institutions, and I think that, Amina, you really you motivated me. So now we really have to schedule this phone call with all of us. But the week, and as a representative of a major institution, I can only do so much unless I have the voice of the community to push. And then I'm like, look, this is what they saying, y'all. So to have community members collectively pushing against the status quo is, I think, the most powerful thing. And I want to see it, I think a lot of people who are in positions to do things sometimes are afraid to stick their necks out there, unless you have the backing of Black Lives Matter, you have the backing of, community voices. And so that's what I want us to leave with, is that even, they matter in so many areas. They matter in the voting, they matter in clinical trials, they matter in research and in documentaries. And so just don't be silent. And then, so you can follow me on Instagram, at _ALLISONMATHEWS, just one T, two L's, one T. And then also I would encourage you all to like the Maya Angelou Center for Health Equity's Facebook page. So that's WFMACHE. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Stephen, last 2 minutes, your 2-minute remarks and where we can follow you.
I felt like I was in school. I was like, oh, I wasn't ready.
You said I was a teacher before.
Yeah, first, thank you everybody for being here, and thank you, Kimberly, for even setting this up and rescheduling it. I mean, you didn't have to, and I definitely appreciate that, and then inviting me, feeling like some contribution of mine would be of value in some way. So I do appreciate that. Overall, I think, these two communities, in terms of African American and Native American communities, I think, they're so intertwined in so many different ways. And I think we would be doing all of ourselves a disservice if we didn't constantly reaffirm that, because it's not in anyone's interest but our own to reaffirm it. And so, if anything, it works against, some of our opposition, institutionally and otherwise, to not affirm it. So it's kind of like it's our duty, especially if we have any kind of knowledge of that, to make sure that we constantly reaffirm it, constantly find spaces where we can discuss. I think, also just recognizing that the space that we're currently in right now is a revolutionary space. I mean, this collection of people discussing these kinds of concepts openly is new. And I think that's something that we also need to also constantly remind ourselves, us being literate is new, in at least in recent history, And so us being able to discuss inequities and talk change and talk about these different things, those are things that would get people killed, in any kind of format. And so I think appreciating and recognizing this space as much as we can is imperative, and also supporting spaces like this is very important. So I just say thank you, just for allowing me to be a part of that. And as far as what ARC Center is doing, I changed my name on here. I found out how to do that on Zoom. So at the bottom, it's aarccenter.org. And anything you want to know about our organization is there. And yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much. Sutton, I'm going to go just in order. Tell us 2 minutes remarks and where we can follow you.
Sure. I also was caught off guard there. I was actually changing my name to follow Stephen there. So yeah, I just want to thank everyone for being on this panel and being vulnerable, to share their experiences and tell their stories. And I think it's so beautiful when we're able to be vulnerable with one another and tell our, true stories and our true experiences, because it brings us closer together and it connects us in ways we probably didn't imagine we could connect. And I think that it's just really beautiful to share this dialogue with you all in a time that for me personally, I really need it. So it's really just helping me to keep that fire burning, because it's definitely been some heavy times that we've been experiencing. So I just want to thank you all. And just something I always say is, I say your truth is good medicine. And I just want to encourage, others who are tuning in to walk in that truth unapologetically, because it's good for your soul, and your ancestors are so excited and filled with so much joy when you do. So yeah, you can follow me on Instagram, Facebook, Sutton King. So that's just SUTTON King. And then Urban Indigenous Collective is our nonprofit. And so you can follow us on Instagram or Facebook. It's Urban Indigenous Collective. And it's all spelled out. It's very long, but that's the handles. And so connect with me and connect with our team. We're short UIC, and looking forward to being in community with anyone who comes on over and connects with me in this virtual realm.
Thank you so much. Yeah, thank you so much. Mallory, give us some remarks and where we can follow you.
Okay, 2 minutes, but no, I'm not gonna be long with it. Kimberly, thank you so much. Again, you're phenomenal for always teeing up additional platforms for us, our collective, to have a voice even beyond our own platform. So thank you for that. Allison, you're always right by her side, so I appreciate that, and I'm calling you out to co-pilot. What I'll say is deny the divide. I think we have a very rich history between Indigenous and African American communities, clearly, because there is all of us, the fruit from our past and our history. And I hate to know that there was a moment in time, or a period in time, I should clarify, for which we were pinned against each other. And in so many ways, it was us trying to identify with so much who we were that we were disassociating with the communities around us, even if those have been our allies all along, just to have our place. So I understand the history in that. However, the history we have together is even bigger, and together we can accomplish more. So continue to have the conversations on and off lives, in and out of the workplace. I'm gonna even say that, in and out of the workplace, because if people try and create these dialogues and expect for you to shut down because of the space that you're in, if we allow it, we're defeating our own higher power and mission in this life. So I continue to say, speak out, find local resources, your safe place, and people that you can entrust these conversations and be vulnerable with. Because like my sister said, like Facebook or any type of social platform is difficult to get up here and to talk about things that aren't so glamorous, that people continue to make fabulous for social media. And a lot of people have been struggling going back to work, looking on their phone every day to find someone else has been murdered or not arrested. And then as content creators as well, trying to find the mental health balance. And as creatives, that's what we do. That's what we're built to do, and feeling stifled in that space as brown and Black people, it's a difficult time. So having this conversation creates an outlet, gives us an opportunity to spread more love than anything else. And I just encourage everybody that's listening and it was a part of this panel to continue to do the remarkable work that you're doing. You can find me on Facebook at Mallory B. Richardson, and on Instagram at Mal the Model. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mal. All right, Adafa, let's go. You're next.
All right. 2 minutes, right?
That's right.
Thank you to everyone who participated. It's been an amazing evening. I thoroughly enjoyed the conversation. I look forward to future conversations. So I'm hoping that we'll do a part 2 and 3 and 4, and as we go along. The thing that I am most enthused about this evening is the fact that when I sit back and think about the fact that for hundreds of years, the primary fight that we have had is that of decolonizing our minds. I'm sitting on a conversation with a group of people that I consider to be free intellectually. That in and of itself is a wonderful accomplishment, considering the fact that we share a dual heritage. So kudos to everybody. Salute. Love you guys. I appreciate the conversation. I wouldn't be me if I didn't recommend the book before I left. If you guys get a chance, pick this up. It's Both Sides of the Water, Essays on African Native American Interactions by Lonnie Harrington. You won't regret it. It's a great read.
Check that out. Nice.
Thank you so much. I love a good teacher. Always breaking out a book. I'm all about it. I'm reading like 3 books right now. So love it. Amina, we're going to close out your 2 minutes and where we can follow you.
Okay. Well, first of all, thank you, Kimberly, again. You've been such a blessing. It's been so nice to meet you and connect with you, have conversations with you. And it's so nice to meet all of you. And I think I'll tell a little bit of my story for the younger people out there, because I'm 25. I've struggled with anxiety. I'm very introverted. I don't like public speaking. Honestly, in my opinion, I prefer the writing, which is why I would encourage you to follow my blog, goodmedicinewoman.com. But it's important to overcome, like for me to overcome this and to do my own healing to benefit the collective. And so anybody else that's out there that's watching that's really shy, like I'm really shy. So if I can do it, you can do it. And mentorship is everything. I was really blessed to have the parents that I have, to have people who believed in me, who heard my voice in more intimate spaces, one-on-one conversations, and pushed me in front of bigger platforms. And I'm also a competitor. So, you know, just being competitive and rising to the challenge, and like looking at it that way, if you're an athlete, like rising to the challenge, not just for the individual benefits of whatever endeavors you're doing in academia or in athletics, but also rising to the challenge for your people. So it's important to look at it that way. There's nothing scary about this. This is something that's going to benefit you. It's going to benefit your ancestors. It's going to benefit future generations. So that's all I have for you guys. And also in terms of burnout, my mentor says rest is also an act of resistance. So don't push yourself too much. This stuff is heavy. It's not easy. Make sure you take the time to take care of yourself, because if you're not optimized, then your work's not going to be optimal. So that's all I have. goodmedicinewoman.com. You can find me on Instagram at Mimi Sane. So thank you.
Thank you so much. I think I got everybody now. So I just want to take this moment to thank everyone for being on the panel tonight. Like it's been said, it's not easy to talk about topics like this, but even with launching the Black Indians NC Powwow, even with launching that earlier this year, we faced opposition. We faced a few people that left comments that were opposing to it, felt that it was disrespectful, and felt that we weren't true people that were Indigenous. We had all types of comments. It was only a few. And even though we only had a few, maybe 4 or 5 comments like that, we had over 38,000 people look and like our posts. So with that being said, Black Indians NC, please follow us there. I'm happy to say there are some council members that are on the advisory board up here. So yes, thank y'all for being on the Powwow Council. And I'm really excited about the powwow itself. I think these topics in the meantime, while we're in the midst of quarantine or dealing with COVID-19, as I say, with restrictions, this is a good time to really have some really strong dialogue. I'm going to be going there. I'm telling you, I'm going to be talking about blood quantums. We're going to be talking about CBID cards. We're going to talk about tribal enrollment, why the books have been closed for whatever periods of time they may have been. Talking about tribal leadership. Talking about ways that youth can get involved and ways they can exercise their voices in their communities. All in positivity and light, in the sense of, in order to really get down to the really core deep issues, because there was a time when we were relying on each other, because as has been said tonight, we're a collective of people, and it's not just us on this panel, it's thousands of people that share this same collective of having both Indigenous and African-American background. So with that being said, I want to leave everybody tonight with, I dedicate this episode to my late aunt. Her name was Anna Carolyn Lucas King. I dedicate this episode to her because we had talked many times about researching my mother's side of the family. She was my mother's older sister. And my mother's been deceased now about 2.5 years. And one thing I had started talking to my mother about was her family history. And she really wanted to know more about her father's people. She didn't know too much about them. She just knew that he lived in Nash County and that the family somewhere along the line was in Halifax and Warren. Currently, I've been working on it for about 6 months. I've been strongly dedicating time to it. And I will say now I'm in the late 1700s, and baby, I got some things in that book that's going to be in there when I get it all together to give the family. I'm not going to do any spoilers tonight because I know some families watching. But we have a long lineage of amazing, courageous, and just authentically themselves African-American, African, and Indigenous people in our family. And I hope it gives the youth in my family a great sense of pride of being of both of these heritage backgrounds and give them a sense of pride to move forward. So to that tonight, I want to say thank you, panelists. We will be having some more talks, everybody. So please follow us at Black Indians NC on Facebook. And I know y'all been asking me about Instagram. I'm going to do it. I promise. But again, thank you so much. And everyone have a wonderful night. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Have a good one.
Thank you so much.
Bye,
Thank
y'all.
you. Bye. Thank you.